Salem Media is an Israeli foreign agent. It is listed in a Foreign Agent Registration Act form with the Department of Justice as the delivery mechanism for a major contract between Israel's foreign ministry and Clock Tower Strategies through a German firm called Havas to propagandize the American public. We're talking about $10 million of direct payments to podcasters and influencers, as well as hundreds of millions of dollars to cover the deliverables. And the Salem Media Group chief strategy officer is a federally registered Israeli foreign agent named Brad Parscale, who heads Clock Tower Strategies. Laura Trump, who is Trump's daughter-in-law, and Donald Trump Jr., who is Donald Trump's daughter, now own a 30% stake in Salem Media. So they have effectively merged through this foreign agent business deal with the Israeli foreign ministry. The Trump family has merged with the Israeli foreign ministry.
That was journalist Max Blumenthal of The Gray Zone explaining how deeply tied to Israel this particular administration is, and it goes far beyond what you just heard. And that's saying something considering the fact that this isn't the first time the American government has been accused of having very strong ties to Israel. However, for the first time, maybe ever, the American people are beginning to understand just how deeply entrenched Israel is within our nation. We're at the point that, according to our own congressional leaders, Trump was convinced to attack Iran by Israel and on behalf of Israel, and it's akin to the Israeli government doing a covert coup of the United States government. But as any and everyone knows, the first step to doing coup stuff is doing propaganda stuff. It certainly helps if the people are on board with all of your coup stuff, and Israel has been leading efforts to propagandize the American people for decades. Prior to this revelation about the Trumps and Salem Media, Blumenthal named plenty of other names who are actively complicit in pushing pro-Israel rhetoric on the American people in our own American media.
It is not fully appreciated and is not discussed. You're not allowed to discuss this in U.S. mainstream media, that these figures are effectively unregistered Israeli foreign agents. I'll just read off some names. If you're not American and you're not in our media world, you might not recognize them all, but these are some of the most visible figures in the MAGA podcast world. Josh Hammer, Israel Firster, has very little popular appeal, but you just see him everywhere because he's astroturfed. Dennis Prager from PragerU, which is this major propaganda mechanism, which has been actually affecting educational curricula in Florida under the watch of the Israel First governor, Ron DeSantis, where they're actually propagandizing children in favor of Israel. Prager, I think, is a Jewish convert to evangelical Christianity. Larry Elder, one of the major Black Republican influencers, radio host. Hugh Hewitt, who is someone who was out there supporting the Iraq War, is a very, very mainstream Republican AM radio voice. Dinesh D'Souza, Sebastian Gorka, who is on Trump's NSC team and has a radio show that's nationally broadcast. Brandon Tatum, Todd Starnes, and then Laura Trump and Don Jr. Okay, what do they all have in common? They all are broadcast through something called Salem Media. Salem Media is an Israeli foreign agent. It is listed in a Foreign Agent Registration Act form with the Department of Justice as the delivery mechanism for a major contract between Israel's foreign ministry and Clock Tower Strategies through a German firm called Havas to propagandize the American public. We're talking about $10 million of direct payments to podcasters and influencers, as well as hundreds of millions of dollars to cover the deliverables. And the Salem Media Group.
Additionally, Blumenthal quote tweeted the earlier clip you saw, adding that on top of Laura and Donald Trump Jr. owning a 30% stake in Salem Media, CNN's Scott Jennings is also with Salem, whose chief strategy officer is a federally registered Israeli foreign agent. Many or most major MAGA propagandists still standing with Trump are being incentivized by Israel. Trump Inc. and Israel have merged. I don't think it's surprising to anyone that Scott Jennings is an Israeli propagandist, nor is it surprising to anyone that he has still got a literal seat at the CNN table, even though half of his arguments make no sense. And I am being generous and a little facetious with that half. To be fair, it's not surprising that any of the people Blumenthal mentioned are getting paid to push Israeli propaganda. It's not very America first, is it? But let's back up, because not even Trump is America first. Before he even got to how Trump's son and daughter-in-law became financially entangled with Israeli media, Blumenthal explained that Trump's entire political career can be defined by its ties to Israel. In fact, the Trumps in Israel go all the way back to Fred Trump, Donald's father, who donated land for the Beach Haven Jewish Center in Brooklyn to the Chabad Lubavitch cult, as Blumenthal called it. But there are plenty of people from Trump's father's generation and his own who Trump has surrounded himself with, people who have been working for Israel for years.
Donald Trump's entire world is surrounded. I mean, his world, his political world is defined by pro-Israel billionaires who are his counterparts coming up in New York. Charles Kushner, for example, who is also a very corrupt real estate baron. Howard Lutnick was someone who was in Trump's world as the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, and someone who's also closely connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Steve Witkoff was Trump's longtime golfing buddy, major real estate baron, who's very much a part, along with his sons, of the Zionist political world and the Zionist movement. And so when Donald Trump was running for president, however, he wasn't fully locked and loaded with the Likud mindset. And you can see that in his first speech, which I always come back to the Republican Jewish Coalition, which is effectively run by the Adelsons, was run by the Adelsons. They have their annual convention at the Sands Casino, which is owned by the late casino baron Sheldon Adelson. And Donald Trump appeared there, I think it was 2015 or 2016. And he made some comments that were unacceptable and said, you guys are, all in real estate. I know you guys. We need to make a deal. We need to make a deal between the Israelis and Palestinians. He was already thinking, I'm going to get a Nobel Peace Prize and I'm going to solve the world's most intractable conflict because I know all the people that are on Israel's side and it should be easy to move them. And they called him an anti-Semite for saying that. And they said, he's playing on stereotypes that Jews are all involved in real estate and we're all slumlords. But the real problem was that Donald Trump said, you're going to make a deal. We will have a Palestinian state. That was the problem.
Now, if you'll recall, Trump has been speaking out against Iran and the Obama administration's Iran nuclear deal since roughly 2015. That was before he became president. That deal solved a lot of the Iranian problems that we seem to have today, specifically the threat that they could develop nuclear weapons and use them against us. But without giving any explanation as to why he felt this way, Trump said it was a terrible deal back before anyone even knew he was trying to run for president. Once he won, one of the first things he did was pull out of the Iran deal without replacing it with anything. Suddenly, the Iran nuclear threat was back on the table as a geopolitical variable, a variable that would be leveraged and abused by Israel and by proxy, the United States. More recently and more pressing over the weekend, the big headline was that the Iran peace deal talks have collapsed. Trump, who campaigned on his own image and self-imposed reputation as a master negotiator, sent J.D. Vance in his stead to negotiate peace with the Iranians. J.D. Vance doesn't exactly have the same reputation, nor does he really have any experience negotiating anything, so he was an interesting choice. Not even our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, went to Iran. Where was Marco Rubio? He was with Trump at a UFC match while Vance was negotiating or doing whatever it was he was actually doing over there. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that Trump never had any intention of negotiating peace with Iran. Even this current ceasefire is not really a ceasefire when Israel finds itself conveniently exempt from the ceasefire. But Trump took so much pride in negotiating so much peace and ending all of those wars just last year. Do you remember that? When he kept talking about all of the international conflicts and wars that he was ending, with the number getting bigger every single time he would bring it up? So why couldn't or wouldn't he do that with the war that he started himself? Why would he not even try? Trump arrived at an anti-Iran deal rally, and I have to mention that my Texas Senator Ted Cruz was also there. This was back in 2015, and it was at this rally that it was essentially decided that Trump would go to war with Iran if he became president.
But it was at that point when he made this bargain to shatter the Iran deal, the JCPOA, which suggested that there was a deeper bargain to actually go to war with Iran. But first he had to set the stage for the war, that Donald Trump was going to be the front runner. He was going to get hundreds of millions of dollars from the Adelsons, and then other, what I would call Israel first billionaires, would supplement that support.
And from there, the money kept rolling in from the Israeli side. Trump attracted plenty of pro-Israel donors after agreeing to toe the Israeli line, but ultimately it would mean that Trump was obligated to go to war with Iran at some point. With his second term in office, after the Democrats had done literally nothing to distance our government or nation from the genocidal ambitions of Israel, Trump was more empowered than ever. Also, he solidified his cabinet and advisory base, ensuring that we had the most pro-Israel administration maybe ever. I'll end with this bit, but there's plenty more in this interview from Blumenthal, so I encourage you to watch the whole thing when you have time. Just weeks before Trump launched his war with Iran, Benjamin Netanyahu came to the White House, and much to the ire of even some of the loudest MAGA voices, Netanyahu was in the Situation Room, sitting not as a guest, but as an equal to Donald Trump.
And then you have the secret February 11th meeting, Glenn, that you mentioned, that the New York Times revealed. We all knew something like this was taking place because Netanyahu was in town at that time. Highways were being shut down. He was given presidential level security. And then he storms into a Situation Room meeting, which is highly unusual for any foreign leader. And he sits at the head of the table while Trump sits to the side, and he dictates to Trump and begins fear-mongering and tells Trump Iran will have a nuclear weapon within a week. It has a delivery mechanism to attack Europe. It will soon be able to attack the United States. You must strike Iran now. And behind him on a live stream telecast is the Mossad director, David Barnea, who had been constantly briefing John Ratcliffe. And Trump fell into line. He knew what to do. And all of his team, though, the A-team that had been cultivated by Israel, also including CENTCOM chief Dan Kane from the Pentagon brass, who was never a fan of this war, they all started murmuring to themselves, this war is insane. What Netanyahu is saying is bogus. Like, even Ratcliffe said this is ridiculous. Marco Rubio called it BS. But what did none of them dare to do? Tell Trump how they felt. They're all a bunch of yes men.
I think being called a yes man is maybe one of the most insulting things someone can be called. It says you're spineless. It says you're not a leader. It says you're willing to put your own personal ambitions over everything else. It says a lot about a person, and none of it is good. Trump went out of his way to surround himself with yes men and women. Blumenthal also mentioned, for example, Tulsi Gabbard in the interview. But even Pam Bondi couldn't get to yes quite as much as Trump would have liked her to. From the very beginning of his presidential campaign, people said, yes, people like me, that Trump's overtly stated preference to surround himself with loyalists was extremely troubling and should have been taken very seriously at the time. It wasn't, and that is how we ended up here now. To end on something of a positive note, it seems as though both Israel and the United States government have backed themselves into corners. The American people do not support the war with Iran. They do not support the U.S. backing of Israel. They do not support this administration, judging from both the number of protesters who have come out against the administration and Trump's very low approval ratings. The next leader of this country should be a leader who can and will sever U.S. ties with Israel, but I fear that won't be such an easy thing to do considering how entrenched Israeli operatives are within our government and media. It will take some time, but I assume it's doable eventually. Unfortunately, that leader has yet to present themselves. While the Democratic Party continues to push centrist, pro-Israel potential presidential candidates on us, people like Gavin Newsom, Alyssa Slotkin, and yes, even Kamala Harris again. And while the DNC decides to spend its time launching offensive attacks against popular and prominent progressive voices like Hassan Piker, voices who happen to speak out against Israel, our two-party political system has a very long way to go as far as actually being representative of the American people. One quick word of encouragement though, big change can and does happen in much smaller elections. Pay attention to your local and state level elections. Take solace and find hope among the progressive candidates either winning these smaller elections or shortening the existing margin. Even if it's a state level representative, an alderman, whoever, whatever, big changes can and do start at home, all right? That's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.